in the state of Black America in 1990. In spite of a century of overall improvement in the health of Americans, statistics showing persistent negative disparity between the health status of blacks and other minorities and that of the population as a whole. The alarming decline in black life expectancy, what are we talking about here? Black life expectancy is getting shorter at birth. Over the last several years, emphasizes the fact that life expectancy at birth for the nation's black populations stands now at a level achieved by whites over 30 years ago. What are we saying here? That our life expectancy is at the point where whites were 30 years ago. So what kind of progress are we talking about? And it's going backwards, not forward. This is the result of so-called benign neglect. What are we saying then, ladies and gentlemen? That people are being killed and murdered and abused in terms of neglect. You see, original violence, which was direct against the Indian and direct against the Africans, we would have some people say, well, that was back then, it had nothing to do with it now. It's not true. What happens in the evolution of persons who've experienced traumatic events early in their lives is they go through what we call a repetition compulsion. They continue to create violence, but it's a violence often that's covered over by other things. But when you look deeply into their personality and their behavior, you will see that violence is still a part of their life. It may be hidden, but it's still there. Now, what has happened in this modern American society is that it continues to visit death upon its original victims, but it has sort of distanced itself from that death. Sort of like those pilots who flew over Iraq and dropped bombs on the population and destroyed the populations of those people over there, and yet could get away with it because they weren't there to see it directly, and therefore are made to think of themselves as less violent than other people. Yet there is no nation. This is the most violent, murderous nation upon this earth today. And yet it dares project itself as a moral paragon among nations. It is a nation that talks about how it does not want third world nations and to have atomic weapons and other weapons because they're irresponsible. And yet it is the only nation that has dropped 2 bombs upon other people. And it has used the most advanced weapons. But of greater importance is the murder that occurs somewhat silently or that is hidden behind political and ideological rationales, but that is occurring just the same. To quote Pathal again, it is an irrefutable fact that people of the lowest socioeconomic status have higher death rates. Almost every form of disease and disability is more prevalent among the poor. So to be poor is not to suffer from a mere absence of money and income. It is to suffer from a shortened life chance. It is to expose one's health to vulnerability, and ultimately it is to put oneself in harm's way. He goes on to say, the task force on black minority health revealed that there were 60,000 more minority deaths per year based upon an expectation of equal death rate for blacks and whites. What are we saying here? 60,000 black people dying per year who really don't need to die if you had true equality and a responsible healthcare system in America. So the benign neglect of Moynihan and others does not have a benign effect on the black community. It represents death and degradation for that community. And it means again then that the criminal and murderous origins of America are still expressing themselves every day in the lives of our people. And this is the thing that we have to concern ourselves with. We have seen under the Reagan administration a tremendous transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich. And a lot of us talk about equality in this country. But we often don't recognize what equality would require. Many of us are not prepared for the kind of struggle that gaining so-called true equality will require in this country. Those of you who cry for equality in America, not revolution, do not recognize you are still making a revolutionary cry. To move blacks into equality with whites would be a revolution, in this country. It requires a tremendous reorganization of the society, ladies and gentlemen. A tremendous transfer of wealth and power from the white community to the black community. Some of us talk very easily about reparations. Well, reparations, of course, means what? A transfer and movement of tremendous sums of money and wealth into the black community from the white community. It means as well almost a complete reorganization of the white community's perception of black people and its relationship to black people. And there's serious questions as to whether white America is willing to undertake that kind of transfer of wealth and change in perception. It can pay Indians as long as they're out there on the reservations. But can it really pay black Americans and at the same time provide equality in this so-called system? I doubt it very seriously. In fact, when we look at the Reagan years, we'll see a situation where the top 1% of the society had an income increase of 85% before taxes. And at the same time, got something like a 23% reduction in its tax rates. And we see the lower 20% of the society losing income at a rate of 12%, and its tax rate going up from 3 to 5%. What does that mean then? A tremendous transfer of wealth from the poorest segments of the society to the richer segments of the society. I think there's a portion in my book where I make the comment that really, when you look at so-called criminals in terms of class, I said something like, the poor rob houses and the rich rob nations. And this is what we have here. The rich rob the nation. They don't have to mug in the street. That doesn't mean that they're less criminal. Just means that they have another means by which to rob. Why knock somebody in the head when you can work for the SNL and just rob the whole people and make the things build? And we call them white-collar crimes, as if they're not robbing you just the same. Marion Wright Edelman talks about this neglect in the State of Black America in 1989. Despite significant progress in reducing the U.S. infant mortality rate, the rate for blacks remains twice as high as that for whites. In 1986, where white babies died at the rate of 8.9 per thousand, non-white children were at 15.7, blacks were at 18.0 per thousand. This is murder, ladies and gentlemen. In 1990, there were 16 times as many measles cases as in 1983. You're hearing about the measles epidemic that is beginning to recur in the society. This is the result of benign neglect. And the kind of measles now that is coming back seems to be more vicious than the original form and is occurring at an earlier point in these children's lives. I think now, Dr. McIntyre could probably clarify this, the measles attacks are occurring before age 5, early in the life of these children. The immunization initiative is but 20% less than the levels recommended. This is death and damnation. America's child poverty rates have been growing and are levels well above any year in the 1970s. The recession years of the 1970s and 80s saw an average of 750,000 poor children a year. The budget offers no steps to deal with the recession or to reduce the poverty. So what do we have in here again? Devil. Let's look quickly at what I call educational neglect. Again, quoting from Marian Wright Government in 1989, the State of Black America, for that by the urban leader. The education president, she says, proposes to abandon much of the federal government role supporting school improvement. And you saw the other day, the ballyhooed, a much heralded educational platform. No additional money or anything at all involved here. He will still dump the cost of the